Family Appreciation Day. This episode focuses on Apple Bloom and involves her and her family undertaking an important harvest for their farm. I know this isn't actually episode 11, but I'm doing this in the play order of the streaming service I use, and I was already halfway done with the writing by the time I realized this. I'm Count Lurchlot, and this is Lukewarm Television. The episode begins with Granny Smith waking the Apple siblings with pots and pans because the Timberwolves are howling, which means the Zap Apples are coming. What's a Zap Apple? Just wait and find out. The next morning, they are getting ready for the harvest. Applejack and Big Mac place buckets around what appear to be dead trees. Meanwhile, Apple Bloom helps Granny Smith, that being helping her turn the Zap Apples into jam. Unfortunately, Granny Smith has trouble remembering what they are supposed to do, even though she's done this since she was young. There are a lot of steps in the process to make Zap Apple jam, and you have to get each of them just right. There are many moments in this episode where you may think Granny Smith is crazy, but I promise, she isn't. Meanwhile, Applejack and Big Mac witness the Zap Apple trees start to form. I think I finally realized why they are called Zap Apples. I honestly never gave it a second thought. The first crazy step to making the jam is jumping over watering cans, dressed as rabbits while singing the alphabet. What I love about this show is that it has moments I would never say in real life if I didn't see them here. Meanwhile, mean filly Diamond Tiara arrives with her father, Filthy Rich. Diamond Tiara seems amused by what's happening, but Rich seems very serious. It's here we learn of a long-standing business arrangement between the two families. Turns out, every Zap Apple harvest, the apples sell their first 100 jars of jams to the Rich family. This is important, and you'll see why later. Anyway, Diamond Tiara proceeds to insult Apple Bloom and make her feel embarrassed about Granny Smith's silly habits. She then says Apple Bloom should feel glad she's on the farm and not in public, where everyone can see her. This makes Apple Bloom question if any of this is real or if Granny Smith is just a senile old mare. This continues later on in town, where Granny Smith continues to act silly while they gather supplies. She tests saucepans by biting them, and she has an odd method of gathering honey from bees. To make matters worse, the mean fillies appear, and while Apple Bloom tries to hide, Granny Smith only makes things worse by calling out to them and calling Apple Bloom half pint. Do most of these ponies not have grandparents? In my experience, this is what they do. They embarrass us. Remind me to call my grandma and tell her I love her. In the next scene, we cut to the Ponyville school where Filthy Rich is giving a speech about his life to the students for something known as Family Appreciation Day. None of them are particularly interested, not even Diamond Tiara's best friend Silver Spoon. Miss Cheerilee then announces that Apple Bloom will be the next student to bring in a family member. Apple Bloom says that this isn't possible as that will be the same day as the Zap Apple harvest and Big Mac and Applejack won't be available. She also insists that no other family member is available, but then Diamond Tiara intervenes and says that Granny Smith should be available. Miss Cheerilee thinks this is a great idea and looks forward to seeing her. Not wanting to be the laughingstock of Ponyville, Apple Bloom spends much of the episode trying to prevent Granny Smith from speaking. I know this might make Apple Bloom seem like a brat, but I'm sure many of us have had that one family member we're embarrassed by. I should know, I was the embarrassing relative. To my sisters, I'm sorry. The first thing Apple Bloom tries is begging Applejack or Big Mac, but they can't as the apples will disappear the day after the harvest. We then see the first sign of the Zap Apples blooming. Worried about what's to come, Apple Bloom turns to the other Crusaders for help. Before we see their first plan, we see Granny Smith undertaking one of the steps to making jam, which is speaking to glass jars like a drill sergeant. I know this is crazy, but please bear with me. To help Apple Bloom, the Crusaders make her up to look sick so she won't have to go to school. Unfortunately, Granny Smith sees right through this. She had kids before, she's likely seen all of the tricks. While witnessing the next sign that marks the appearance of Zap Apples, they come up with their next plan. They try to harvest the apples before harvest day. I'm no farmer, but I know this is a bad idea. Apple Bloom also feels this is a bad idea because they aren't ripe, and unlike normal apple trees, Zap Apple trees are magic. They try anyway, and here's what happens. They try bucking and they get zapped. Again, really seeing things I didn't see before. Then they try picking, but they end up getting catapulted into the pig pen. I feel that might be karma. The next attempt is hilarious as they call Cheerilee over under the guise that Granny Smith wants to talk to her, and while Granny Smith is napping, they manipulate her like a puppet and say she can't come. Somehow, Cheerilee is convinced by this, but in the excitement of their success, Scootaloo accidentally wakes Granny Smith up. Upon seeing Miss Cheerilee, Granny Smith goes to talk to her and ends up saying she wouldn't miss Family Appreciation Day for anything. This confuses Miss Cheerilee, especially after Granny Smith is lifted out of the window. This scene is just pure gold. Then, while Granny Smith is painting pink polka dots around the house, the Crusaders come up with one more way to help Apple Bloom. They'll get Granny Smith to run off of her own free will. The next day, we get a very cool scene of the Zap Apples ripening as they transform into amazing rainbow-colored apples. Put this on the list of fictional food I wish was real. Out of nowhere, Scootaloo appears dressed as a mail carrier saying Granny Smith has a telegram. I love this bit as well because I just love how Granny Smith immediately falls for this. The telegram says a relative called Apple Strudel wants her to pay him a visit. Apple Bloom says she can make the 8 AM train and has even packed Granny Smith a bag. Granny Smith leaves, saying she'll be back later to make the jam. Apple Bloom then breathes a sigh of relief as the train ride takes all day. At school, Apple Bloom expresses how Granny Smith couldn't make it, but then, to everyone's surprise, she turns up anyway, and then she name drops the show.
Well, howdy, my little ponies!
Granny Smith didn't get on the train because the relative she was going to see was actually on it. This is another moment I love because she really can't catch a break. Granny Smith wastes no time being embarrassing as she fails to sit properly, after which she tells her story, which is a very interesting tale. She talks about how different things were in Ponyville when she was young, because there was no Ponyville. We also get another series name drop.
That's right, my little ponies.
Back when Granny Smith was a filly, her family were pilgrim folk who travelled far and wide collecting and selling seeds. I'm guessing Granny Smith also remembers stuff in old movie format. Anyway, one day the Smith family arrived in Canterlot where they met Princess Celestia, who looks exactly the same as she does now. I guess these are the benefits of being a pony princess. Upon seeing that the Smith family were trying to find their forever home, she guides them to where they can make their home, which thankfully didn't cause Granny Smith's parents to separate. Upon arriving, they build a home and start an orchard, but unfortunately they were low on food. So, one night, Granny Smith snuck out and headed into the Everfree Forest, because if there are animals living there, surely there is something to eat. While there, Granny Smith laid eyes on the Zap apples for the first time, which she felt were the most incredible things she ever saw. She started picking the apples, but had to leave early due to the dangers of the timber wolves, which are literally wolves made from timber. She managed to run home and scared off the timber wolves with pots and pans, which explains what she was doing at the start. After helping her father plant the Zap apple seeds, they grow almost immediately. It was from this she learnt the signs that the Zap apples were coming. She also quickly learnt that the Zap apples would disappear if you didn't pick them all in one day. It's very clear why Applejack and Big Mac were too busy to come and speak. Nevertheless, they created tasteful and colourful pastries from the apples, which eventually led to Granny Smith turning the apples into jam. It's from here that Granny Smith learnt that like the harvesting of the Zap apples, there were also special rules to turning them into jam, like being extra friendly with the bees, giving the jars a stern talking to, and painting pink polka dots around the house because the Zap apples liked them. That's right, all the crazy stuff she was doing throughout the episode wasn't her being silly. She's been doing this since she was young, and it's what allowed her to perfect the jam. Eventually, they started selling the jam to visiting ponies, some of whom decided to stay. This includes a stallion named Stinkin' Rich, who was Diamond Tiara's great-grandfather and started his own business by reselling the jam. Now you can see why they have this business arrangement. Anyway, because a number of ponies decided to stay, this eventually led to the founding of the town, now known as Ponyville. That's right, Applejack is literally descended from the founders of Ponyville. All of the young ponies are starstruck by Granny Smith's story, with Silver Spoon being the first to give applause. I mention this because I appreciate the moments that show that while Silver Spoon can be a brat like Diamond Tiara, she's clearly a much nicer pony and is likely only mean to others due to negative influence. This also allows the young ponies to realize that without Granny Smith and her family, there would be no Ponyville. Apple Bloom also points out that without Granny Smith, Diamond Tiara's family wouldn't have the business empire they have today. Knowing this, you'd think Diamond Tiara would be nicer to Apple Bloom, but unfortunately, she doesn't learn her lesson because for many episodes to come, she's still a mean filly. Diamond Tiara tries to save face by calling Granny Smith a kooky old lady, but Apple Bloom steps forward and calls her the most amazing pony in Ponyville. I know she's been a little bratty this episode, but I'm glad Apple Bloom has realized how important and great Granny Smith is. We later see them making the jam, selling it to the ponies, and then enjoying it with friends. While we don't end with a written lesson to the princess, Apple Bloom still mentions the lesson she learnt and how she forgot how amazing her grandmother is, but Granny Smith doesn't mind as she forgets things all the time. The episode then ends with the other young ponies helping Granny Smith sing to the water, and Diamond Tiara faces karma by being forced to help as well. Good to see that Rich appreciates the family who helped build his family's fortune. What I find good about this episode is that it's another accurate representation of how children can act. How they can sometimes be embarrassed by certain family members because they may act a little silly, but at the end of the day, we appreciate and love them when we see how truly amazing they are. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next review.